Ambassador Lee Hannah stepped carefully from the transport shuttle, her black diplomatic shoes clicking against the cold metallic floor of the Galactic Council station. The massive structure stretched endlessly in all directions, its walls gleaming with alien technology that hummed with power beyond human understanding. 12 different species called this place home, and each one looked more strange and frightening than the last. Hannah carried a simple briefcase in her right hand and the weight of an entire planet's hopes on her shoulders. She was Earth's first official diplomat to make contact with the galaxy's ruling body. Everything depended on how well she could represent humanity today. The council chamber made her feel very small. It was shaped like a perfect circle, with 12 floating platforms arranged around the edges. Each platform was designed for a different alien species. Some platforms floated in pools of strange colored liquid. Others were surrounded by clouds of gas or crackling energy fields. The human platform sat in the center, plain and simple compared to the others. As Hannah walked to her position, she felt dozens of alien eyes watching her every move. Some looked curious like children seeing a new toy. Others looked angry as if she had no right to be there at all. A few seemed hungry like predators sizing up their next meal. "Look what crawled out of the mud," said a deep hissing voice. General Vortak rose slowly from his platform, his massive reptilian body covered in dark green scales that reflected the chamber's lights. Each scale was the size of Hannah's hand, and his yellow eyes glowed with cruel intelligence. The primitive world finally sends someone to beg for scraps. Hannah kept her face calm and professional, just like her training had taught her. "General Vortak, I come here representing both the Republic of Korea and the United Nations of Earth. We offer friendship, trade, and the chance to learn from each other." The sound that filled the chamber was not pleasant. It was laughter, but not the kind humans made when something was funny. This laughter was sharp and mocking, coming from creatures with too many teeth or no mouths at all, or sounds that seemed to come from inside Hannah's own head. "Technology exchange?" clicked a voice from above. Hive Master ZZKT looked like a giant insect crossed with a machine. Its 4 arms moved independently as it spoke, each one ending in razor-sharp claws. "Your species barely left your home planet 50 years ago. We have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. What could you possibly teach us?" Another delegate, this one looking like a walking tree made of crystal, joined in. "Cultural sharing? Your people still fight wars over pieces of dirt. We moved beyond such primitive behavior long ago." For the next 3 hours, Hannah presented every proposal Earth had prepared. She spoke about human art, music, and literature. She offered examples of human problem-solving and creativity. She talked about Earth's biodiversity and unique ecosystem. Each time, the council members responded with dismissive sounds or outright insults. "We do not need your crude entertainment," said Admiral Gorth, a creature that looked like a cross between a shark and an octopus, speaking through a tank of green liquid. "We have evolved beyond such base pleasures." "Your military is laughable," added General Vortak. "We could conquer your entire world with a single patrol ship." Hannah felt her patience wearing thin, but she kept trying. Finally, Elder Moss, who seemed to be the council's leader, presented Earth with their generous offer. "We will allow your species to exist," Elder Moss announced, his words dripping with false kindness. "In exchange, you will provide us with biological specimens for study. Your people will serve as manual laborers for our mining operations. 30% of your planet's resources will be sent to us each year. You will have no military ships beyond your own solar system. These terms are not negotiable." The chamber fell silent, waiting for Hannah's response. Every alien eye focused on her, expecting her to bow her head and accept their demands with gratitude. Instead, Hannah stood straighter. "Those terms are completely unacceptable. Earth seeks partnership, not slavery." The reaction was immediate and violent. Roars, screeches, and inhuman sounds of anger filled the chamber. General Vortak's platform descended rapidly toward the human section, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. "You dare refuse our generosity?" he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air near Hannah's face. "You insignificant little creature, do you not understand how easily we could destroy everything you love?" "General, please step back," Hannah said firmly, but her voice remained calm. "Violence has no place in diplomatic negotiations." "Violence?" Vortak laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "This is not violence, little human. This is education." Before Hannah could move or speak, Vortak's massive clawed hand swung through the air. The blow caught her across the left side of her face, sending her stumbling backward into the edge of her platform. Pain exploded through her skull and she tasted blood on her lips. The other council members burst into approving sounds. Some clapped with too many hands. Others stamped feet or tentacles against their platforms. A few made sounds that might have been cheering in their alien languages. "This is how civilized species deal with primitive upstarts," Vorthak announced proudly. "Perhaps now you understand your place in the galaxy." Hannah slowly straightened up, touching her bleeding lip with the back of her hand. Her left cheek was already beginning to swell, and her head throbbed with pain. But her eyes remained steady and clear. Without taking her gaze off Vorthak, she reached into her jacket and pressed a small, hidden button. The device was no bigger than a coin, but it sent a powerful signal across space toward Earth. "I understand perfectly," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet chamber. Blood dripped from her lip onto the metal floor. "Earth will respond accordingly." The council members looked pleased with themselves, believing they had successfully intimidated the human representative. They had no idea that they had just declared war on one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The small red light blinked urgently on Director Kim Ji-won's desk at exactly 3:47 in the morning. She had been working late again, reviewing trade proposals and diplomatic schedules when the emergency signal cut through the quiet of her sole office like a knife. Ji-won's hands moved quickly across her keyboard, pulling up the incoming transmission. Her face went pale as she watched the recorded message from Ambassador Lee Hanna. The footage was shaky and brief, but clear enough to show everything that mattered. She watched Hanna present Earth's proposals with dignity and grace. She watched the alien council members laugh and mock humanity's offerings. And then she watched General Vorthak strike Hanna across the face with enough force to send blood spattering across the camera lens. "No, no, no," Ji-won whispered, her stomach dropping as she realized what this meant. In 30 years of diplomatic service, she had never seen an ambassador physically assaulted during official negotiations. This was not just an insult to Earth. This was a declaration that the galaxy saw humanity as nothing more than animals to be beaten into submission. Her secure terminal suddenly chimed with a sound she had hoped never to hear. The screen flashed red and text appeared in stark white letters. "Override code 77 Alpha. File transfer initiated." "Ma'am," her young aide Park Soo-min said nervously from the doorway. The poor girl looked terrified. "Special Operations is requesting immediate transfer of all files related to Ambassador Lee's mission." Ji-won felt her blood turn to ice water in her veins. Special Operations was a department that officially did not exist. They only became involved when normal diplomacy had failed so completely that other methods were required. Methods that were never discussed in polite company. She could only watch helplessly as every document, every video file, every piece of intelligence about the Galactic Council was automatically copied and sent to a classified department buried somewhere beneath the city. Within minutes, the diplomatic solution to humanity's first contact with alien civilization had been taken out of her hands completely. 3 floors below the streets of Seoul, deep in the underground levels of the defense complex, Colonel Park Mi-ho sat in a room that had no windows and no official designation. The walls were covered with screens showing maps of distant star systems, alien ship designs, and classified intelligence reports that most people would never be allowed to see. Mi-ho had been reviewing routine security reports when Ambassador Lee's emergency transmission arrived on his desk. He watched the footage 3 times without any change in his expression. His face remained as calm and professional as always, but his subordinates had learned to recognize the signs. When Colonel Park got very quiet and very still, it usually meant someone somewhere was about to have a very bad day. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Cho Min-seo, said carefully, "should we prepare a formal protest through diplomatic channels? Perhaps request a meeting with the Alien Council to discuss compensation for the assault." Park's smile was thin and sharp as a blade. It was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "No, Lieutenant. I think we need to send our own kind of diplomat to handle this situation." The lieutenant swallowed nervously. Everyone in Special Operations knew what that meant. When Colonel Park talked about sending their own kind of diplomat, he was not talking about someone who had studied international relations at university. Outside Seoul, hidden in a facility that did not appear on any official maps, Kim Dae-ho was finishing his morning routine. The concrete room was sparse and functional, containing only a narrow bed, a small desk and equipment for physical training. At exactly 5:30 each morning, Dae-ho completed 500 push-ups, cleaned and maintained his weapons, and spent 1 hour in silent meditation. At 32 years old, Dae-ho had already completed 47 missions across 12 different worlds. His success rate was perfect, meaning he had never failed to accomplish his objectives. However, his methods were so extreme that they were never mentioned in official reports. Most people in the government preferred not to know the details of how Deho solved problems. When the secure phone rang in his room, Deho answered it on the first ring. He listened without interruption as Colonel Park explained the situation. The mission brief was deceptively simple. Travel to the Galactic Council station and secure favorable diplomatic relations with the alien government. The methods for accomplishing this objective were left entirely to his discretion. Deho's pale gray eyes showed no emotion as he read through the files about Ambassador Lee's treatment. He studied each alien council member's photograph, memorizing their faces and reading detailed reports about their species' biology, psychology, and weaknesses. He reviewed the technical specifications of the council station, noting security systems, life support requirements, and structural vulnerabilities. Most people would have felt anger or disgust while watching the footage of Hannah being struck. Deho felt nothing except professional interest. The aliens had made a mistake by showing him exactly how they preferred to conduct negotiations. Now he understood the rules of the game they wanted to play. "When do I leave?" he asked, closing the files and looking up at Colonel Park. "Your ship is being prepared now," Park replied. "The cover story is that you are Ambassador Lee's replacement, sent to continue diplomatic negotiations. Remember, Deho, as far as anyone knows, you are a diplomat. Act accordingly." The two men looked at each other across the small room. Both of them were experienced soldiers who had seen combat on worlds most humans had never heard of. No words were necessary. They both understood exactly what kind of diplomacy would be required to make the aliens understand that striking a human ambassador had consequences. Deho stood and began gathering his few possessions. In less than 24 hours, he would be aboard a ship heading for the Galactic Council station. The aliens thought they had taught humanity a lesson about power and respect. They were about to learn that humans could be very good students when properly motivated. 3 days after Ambassador Lee Hannah's emergency signal reached Earth, a small Korean transport ship called the Magungwa approached the massive Galactic Council station. The vessel looked ordinary and unremarkable compared to the gleaming alien ships that filled the docking bays. Its hull was simple gray metal without fancy decorations or advanced-looking weapons systems. To anyone watching, it appeared to be just another basic diplomatic transport from a primitive world. This was exactly what its designers had intended. The ship docked quietly at Port 17, one of the smaller bays reserved for less important visitors. No fanfare announced its arrival. No honor guard waited to greet the new ambassador. The aliens had made their opinion of human diplomacy very clear 3 days ago. Kim Deho stepped off the transport wearing a perfectly pressed black diplomatic suit and carrying only a small leather briefcase. He walked with the calm, measured steps of a career diplomat, nodding politely to the alien security officers who scanned him with their advanced sensors. The scanners found nothing threatening. No weapons, no explosives, no dangerous technology of any kind. The readings showed only a normal human male with standard diplomatic credentials and a briefcase full of papers. The security systems were very good at detecting guns, knives, bombs, and alien technology. They could not detect the most dangerous thing that had just boarded their station: Deho himself. The council chamber looked exactly the same as it had 3 days earlier, except for one small detail. There were dark stains on the metal floor of the human platform that the cleaning systems had been unable to completely remove. Ambassador Lee's blood had left a permanent mark on the supposedly pristine diplomatic facility. Deho took his position on the human platform and looked around the circular chamber with interest. Each alien delegate sat or floated or hung from their specialized platforms, watching him with the same mixture of curiosity and contempt they had shown his predecessor. "I am Ambassador Kim Deho," he announced in a calm, pleasant voice that carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I have come to continue the negotiations that were, unfortunately, interrupted." General Vortak's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the new human representative. This one looked different from the female they had dealt with before. Smaller in build, but there was something about his posture and the way he moved that reminded Vortak of a predator trying to appear harmless. "Another human?" Vortak said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Did your primitive species not understand the message we sent with your previous ambassador?" Deho's smile was warm and genuine, like a teacher pleased with a student's question. "Oh, we understood perfectly, General Vortak. That's exactly why Earth decided to send me instead of someone else." There was something in his tone that made several council members shift uncomfortably on their platforms. The words were polite and diplomatic, but underneath them was something that made the aliens' instincts whisper warnings about hidden dangers. Elder Zos, the crystalline being who served as the council's psychic monitor, tried to probe the new human's thoughts as he did with all visitors. His telepathic abilities were among the strongest in the galaxy, capable of reading surface emotions and intentions from almost any species. His mental touch slid off Deho's mind like water rolling off a smooth stone. There was nothing there to grab onto, no emotional turmoil or fear or anger that he could sense. It was as if the human's thoughts were protected by some kind of invisible shield. "I trust Ambassador Lee is recovering well from her meeting with you?" Deho continued conversationally, still smiling that pleasant diplomatic smile. "Such a shame about her injury. Accidents during negotiations can be so unpredictable." General Vortak's chest swelled with pride as he remembered the satisfying impact of his claws against soft human flesh. "It was no accident, human. It was a lesson. Your kind needed to learn proper respect for your superiors." "Ah," Deho nodded thoughtfully as if this explanation made perfect sense to him. "I see. Thank you for clarifying your diplomatic customs, General. Earth appreciates educational experiences. We are, as you noted, still learning how galactic civilization operates." The other council members relaxed slightly. This human seemed much more reasonable than the stubborn female they had dealt with before. Perhaps a show of force really was the only language these primitives understood. "Now that we all understand each other better," Elder Moss interjected, "perhaps we can proceed with accepting the terms we offered your predecessor." "I look forward to productive discussions," Deho replied pleasantly. "Earth is always eager to learn from more experienced civilizations." The formal session concluded an hour later with polite exchanges and scheduled meetings for the following days. The aliens felt satisfied that they had successfully intimidated the humans into compliance. The new ambassador seemed much more cooperative than the last one. As the delegates dispersed to their quarters, none of them noticed the way Deho's eyes tracked their movements, memorizing their security arrangements and daily routines with the precision of a professional hunter studying his prey. That night, General Vortak returned to his private quarters in the heavily secured Zephyrian section of the station. The area was protected by multiple layers of electronic surveillance, biometric locks, and armed guards who had been specially selected for their loyalty and combat skills. Vortak felt completely safe as he dismissed his personal bodyguards and entered his chambers. The door sealed behind him with the solid click of magnetic locks engaging. He was alone in his sanctuary, protected by the most advanced security technology in the galaxy. He walked to his desk to review intelligence reports about human military capabilities, planning to use the information to further humiliate their new ambassador tomorrow. As he reached for his data pad, his yellow eyes fell on something that should not have been there. A single black knife sat on his desk, its blade driven deep into the metal surface with enough force to penetrate the supposedly indestructible alien alloy. The handle vibrated slightly from the impact, and strange human symbols were carved into the blade's surface. Attached to the knife with a small piece of wire was a handwritten note in perfect Zephyrian script. The handwriting was precise and elegant, showing complete mastery of their complex written language. Asterisk lesson learned. Class is now in session. Your new instructor, Asterisk. Vortak's hands trembled as he reached for his emergency communicator, calling for his security chief. When the guards arrived minutes later, they found their general staring at the knife in shock. A review of the security footage from the corridor outside his quarters showed nothing but empty hallways throughout the entire evening. The sensors had detected no intrusions, no unauthorized access to the restricted area. According to every piece of advanced technology on the station, no one had entered Vortak's chambers except Vortak himself. But the knife was real and the message was clear. The new human ambassador had just announced that the real negotiations were about to begin. The strange incidents began the morning after General Vortak found the knife on his desk. At first, the alien security teams dismissed them as minor technical glitches or coincidences. Space stations were complex machines after all, and small problems happened all the time. But as the days passed, the incidents became impossible to ignore. Elder Zos was the first to report something truly disturbing. The crystalline being lived in a special meditation chamber deep within the station's core. A room filled with carefully arranged geometric sculptures and resonating crystals that helped focus his telepathic abilities. The chamber was protected by the most advanced security systems in the galaxy, accessible only through biometric scanners that read his unique energy signature. When Zos entered his chamber for morning meditation, he immediately knew something was wrong. Every piece of furniture had been moved. His precious meditation crystals were arranged in completely different patterns. Personal artifacts that had been gifts from his homeworld were repositioned throughout the room with mathematical precision. Nothing was damaged or stolen. Everything was simply different. Zos called for the security chief immediately, his crystalline form flickering with distress. "Someone was in my chamber," he insisted. "Someone touched my belongings." The security chief, a professional soldier from the warrior species known as the Keth, examined the room carefully. The biometric scanners showed no unauthorized entries. The surveillance cameras had recorded nothing unusual. According to every piece of technology on the station, Elder Zos was the only person who had entered the chamber in over a week. "Perhaps you moved things yourself and forgot," the security chief suggested diplomatically. "Meditation can sometimes affect memory." But Zos knew better. Someone had been in his most private space, someone who could move through their security systems like a ghost. 2 days later, Hive Master ZZKT discovered his own impossible incident. The insectoid being controlled dozens of small drone units that served as his eyes and ears throughout the station. The drones were extensions of his own nervous system, connected to his brain through advanced biological implants. When ZZKT performed his daily status check, he found that 17 of his drones had been deactivated during the night. They were arranged in perfect geometric patterns throughout the Hive section of the station, forming complex mathematical shapes that would have taken hours to plan and execute. The drones had no memory of being touched. Their sensors showed no record of any contact with foreign objects or beings. One moment they had been functioning normally, the next they were simply switched off and carefully positioned like pieces in some elaborate game. ZZKT's remaining drones searched frantically for any sign of an intruder, but found nothing. The security footage showed empty corridors throughout the night. No alarms had been triggered, no locks had been forced. Admiral Gortha's incident was perhaps the most unsettling of all. The aquatic delegate lived in specially sealed chambers filled with the green liquid that his species breathed. The environment was carefully controlled and completely isolated from the station's normal atmosphere. When Gorth returned to his quarters after a long day of meetings, he found a single flower floating on the surface of his breathing liquid. It was a simple white bloom, the kind that grew in Earth's gardens and required normal air to survive. The flower should not have been able to exist in his liquid environment for more than a few seconds. Yet there it was, perfectly fresh and healthy, floating peacefully in a place where it should have died instantly. Gorth stared at the flower for a long time, understanding the message it represented. Someone had entered his sealed chambers, bypassed every security measure, and placed this impossible gift where only he would find it. The flower was beautiful and harmless, but its very presence was more threatening than any weapon. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kim Dae-ho continued attending the formal diplomatic sessions every day. He always arrived on time, always dressed in his neat black suit, always carrying his simple leather briefcase. He was polite to everyone, smiled at appropriate times, and never raised his voice or showed any sign of anger. But his conversations began to change in ways that made the alien delegate's blood run cold. "General Vorthak," Dae-ho said pleasantly during one afternoon session, his voice as calm and friendly as ever. "How is your daughter Kess doing at the military academy? I understand she's studying advanced tactical warfare on Zephyr Prime. Such a bright young woman. The Academy's new security upgrades must give you great peace of mind as a father." Vorthak's yellow eyes went wide with shock. His daughter's location was one of the most closely guarded secrets in Zephyrian intelligence. Only a handful of people in the entire galaxy knew where she was studying, and all of them had been thoroughly background checked and monitored. "How do you?" Vorthak began, then stopped himself. He did not want to know how this human had obtained such classified information. Dae-ho turned to Elder Zos with the same pleasant smile. "Elder Zos, I've been reading some fascinating research about your species' evolutionary history. The way you develop sensitivity to subsonic frequencies as a defense mechanism is truly remarkable. Of course, that same adaptation makes you vulnerable to certain acoustic attacks, doesn't it? Such an elegant example of how evolution creates both strengths and weaknesses." The crystalline being's form flickered rapidly with terror. The specific frequencies that could harm his species were known only to their own scientists and military leaders. This information was so secret that even possessing it was considered an act of war by the Crystalline Confederation. "Admiral Gorth," Dae-ho continued, his tone remaining conversational and friendly, "I've been studying the tidal patterns on your homeworld. The way they control your species' reproductive cycles is absolutely fascinating. I understand your people become quite vulnerable during the breeding season when the 3 moons align. I would love to visit your planet during the next vulnerability period to observe this natural phenomenon." Admiral Gortha's gills flapped frantically as he struggled to process what he was hearing. The timing of his species' breeding cycles was information so sensitive that even discussing it publicly was punishable by death under their laws. Yet this human was speaking about it as casually as commenting on the weather. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien delegate stared at Deho in growing horror as they realized what his words meant. Somehow, this single human had penetrated their most secure intelligence networks. He had accessed information that was supposed to be impossible for outsiders to obtain. Deho looked around the circle of terrified faces and smiled warmly, like a teacher pleased with his students' attention. Earth's diplomatic corps believes very strongly in thorough research before entering into negotiations. We find that understanding our partners' backgrounds and circumstances helps promote better communication between species. Don't you agree? That night, emergency meetings were held in every delegation's quarters. Security chiefs were called in, intelligence officers were questioned, and communication systems were checked for signs of infiltration. The message was becoming clear to everyone on the station. The human ambassador was not just a diplomat. He was something far more dangerous, and he had been studying them with the patience and precision of a predator preparing to strike. The hunter had become the teacher, and the lesson he was offering was simple and terrifying. They had made a mistake when they struck Ambassador Lee. Now they were going to learn exactly how big that mistake had been. Fear began to spread through the station like a virus, and everyone understood that the real negotiations were just beginning. The emergency council session was called at dawn, when the station's artificial day cycle was just beginning. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, all 12 species sent their representatives to an unscheduled meeting. The chamber that usually echoed with arrogant laughter and dismissive comments was now filled with nervous whispers and fearful glances. General Vorthax sat on his platform looking nothing like the confident predator who had struck Ambassador Lee just 1 week ago. His yellow eyes darted constantly around the chamber, as if expecting threats to emerge from the shadows. His scales, which had gleamed with pride before, now seemed dull and lifeless. The mighty general looked like a frightened animal. Elder Zos flickered weakly on his crystalline platform, his usually bright energy patterns dim with stress and exhaustion. The telepathic being had not slept in 3 days, too afraid to lower his mental defenses in case the human somehow found a way past them during his vulnerable moments. Admiral Gorth floated in his tank of breathing liquid, but the green fluid was cloudy with stress chemicals his body was producing. His gills moved rapidly as he struggled to process enough oxygen from the increasingly toxic environment his own fear was creating. We wish to renegotiate the terms of Earth's membership in the Galactic Council," Elder Zos announced, his voice barely above a whisper. His crystalline form flickered with distress as he spoke the words that would have been unthinkable just days before. The chamber doors opened with their usual soft hiss, and Ambassador Kim Dae-ho walked in wearing the same neat black diplomatic suit he had worn every day since his arrival. He carried his simple leather briefcase and wore the same pleasant, professional smile that had terrified them all for the past week. "Excellent," Dae-ho said warmly, taking his position on the human platform. "I do so enjoy productive diplomatic dialogue. I was hoping we could find a way to move forward together." His tone was exactly the same as it had been during their first meeting. Polite, friendly, and completely calm. But now the aliens understood what lay beneath that pleasant surface, and the sound of his voice made several of them flinch involuntarily. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Gorth demanded, though his voice shook as he spoke. Water dripped from his gills as his body betrayed his fear. "What will it take to make this stop?" Dae-ho tilted his head slightly, looking genuinely confused by the question. "I want exactly the same thing Ambassador Lee wanted when she first came here," he replied simply. "Fair trade agreements between our species, mutual respect for each other's sovereignty, and peaceful coexistence in the galaxy." The silence that followed his words was deafening. The council members looked at each other in disbelief, struggling to understand how such reasonable requests had led to this nightmare scenario. "And if we refuse?" Hive Master Ziziki asked, his compound eyes twitching nervously. "What happens if we decide these terms are still unacceptable?" Dae-ho's smile never wavered as he opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. The folder was made of simple earth paper and looked completely harmless, but every alien in the chamber stared at it as if it contained their death sentences. "Then I suppose I'll need to conduct more cultural research," Dae-ho said conversationally, placing the folder on the central table that connected all the platforms. "Earth's diplomatic corps believes very strongly in understanding our partners thoroughly." General Vorthax's clawed hands trembled as he reached for the folder. Inside, he found detailed satellite photographs of his homeworld's capital city. Every important building was marked with precise annotations. Military bases, government centers, population centers, even his own family's private residence were clearly identified and analyzed. Elder Zos looked at technical schematics of his species' most secret defensive installations, including weapon systems that were supposed to be known only to their highest military commanders. The diagrams were so accurate they could have been drawn by the engineers who built them. Admiral Gorth found comprehensive biological analyses of his species' life cycles, including detailed information about their breeding seasons, nutritional requirements, and environmental needs. The data was more complete than some of their own scientific studies. Each council member discovered that their most closely guarded secrets had been laid bare and studied with scientific precision. Their military capabilities, their technological weaknesses, their biological vulnerabilities, and their social structures were all documented in frightening detail. You see, Deho continued in his pleasant, conversational tone, Earth has been watching the galaxy for quite some time before we made official contact. We're a very curious species by nature. We like to learn about new things and we learn very quickly when we're motivated. General Vorthak stared at aerial photographs of his daughter's military academy, complete with detailed security assessments and daily routine schedules. His hands shook as he realized that this human could have harmed his child at any time during the past week, but had chosen not to. We're also very patient, Deho added, still smiling that same friendly smile. And we have excellent memories. We remember acts of kindness for generations and we remember insults just as long. Especially lessons about how diplomacy is supposed to work. The chamber remained silent for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, Elder Zos spoke in a voice so quiet it was barely audible above the station's background hum. What assurance do we have that Earth won't use this information against us? The crystalline being whispered. How do we know you won't attack our worlds or threaten our people? Deho's pleasant expression never changed, but his next words fell on the chamber like physical blows. The same assurance Ambassador Lee had that she wouldn't be physically assaulted during peaceful diplomatic negotiations, he replied. His tone remained warm and friendly, but the meaning was crystal clear. The message was simple and devastating. Earth would treat the aliens exactly the way the aliens chose to treat Earth. If they wanted peace and respect, they would receive peace and respect. If they preferred violence and intimidation, they would discover that humans were very good students when it came to learning those lessons as well. Within 1 hour, the Galactic Council had drafted and signed a comprehensive treaty establishing Earth as a full member with all the rights and privileges that entailed. The trade agreements were favorable, the mutual defense pacts were equitable, and formal diplomatic immunity was guaranteed for all human representatives. As Deho prepared to return to Earth, General Vorthak approached him privately, his usual arrogance completely gone. How many more like you does your species have? The reptilian asked quietly, his voice filled with dread. Deho's smile was gentle and completely terrifying. General, Earth has over 4 billion people like me. I'm actually considered quite mild and diplomatic by our standards. Most of my people prefer to solve problems through conversation and negotiation. He paused at the chamber's exit, turning back to look at the assembled council one final time. Oh, and General Vorthak? Ambassador Lee asked me to tell you that she's looking forward to the formal apology ceremony next month. She's quite excited to see how your species expresses regret for diplomatic misunderstandings. As the human ambassador walked away, the alien council members sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the true nature of the species they had tried to intimidate. They had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator in the galaxy is the one that prefers not to hunt at all. The lesson was complete and they would never forget it.